Welcome here to our podcast, Bharat and Geopolitics, your compass through the complex world of international affairs with a Bharatiya perspective. In a world where borders blur and ideologies clash, understanding geopolitics is paramount, and what better lens to view it than the rich tapestry of Bharat history, culture, and strategic insights. Today's topic is Japan's recession and India's potential role in turning the tide. Join us as we explore how the economic giants can collaborate for mutual growth. Join me in welcoming our distinguished speaker, Dr. Adityanjee. Dr. Adityanjee is the President of Council for Strategic Affairs. So without any further ado, let's dive into the actionable solutions and reshape the future of Asia's economy. Let's get started. Welcome, Dr. Adityanjee. Welcome to our platform once again.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha. It's always a pleasure to come on your platform and talk to you because you choose very interesting topics.
So I am very much interested in Asia and the world's the very big economy actually, the Japan. Actually, what I find touching about the Japan, Japanese people and Japanese governments takes a lot of effort to connect with Indian people because they like everything about the India's culture, but there is a disconnect between them. So I have been once at the Japan Foundation. Usually they show the movie there in Japanese movie, very motivating movie, and they are known for hospitality. So they welcome you, they will serve you food, and they will show you the movie. They offer free classes to learn Japanese. So government takes a lot of effort, but still uh, some problem is there somewhere because we are not able to connect with them. So when I learned the Japan's economy in recession, so this was I found a very disturbing thing, and I wanted to discuss with you to learn what we can do for Japan. So the very first thing I would like to learn from you, how severe is the recession as per your knowledge and your information?
So, Mr. Sinha, I have a disclaimer. I am not an economist.
Yeah.
I'm interested in strategic issues and geopolitics. And in today's world, geopolitics is very closely related to geoeconomics.
Yes.
So, I keep myself aware of things that are happening in Japan, but I'm not an economist, so I cannot claim to be an expert on Japanese economy, and I cannot really give you an expert's point of view because my understanding is that as a student of strategic studies. Having said that, I have been looking at what has happened in Japan. So the recession in Japan is more like a technical recession rather than actual recession.
I see.
How do we define recession? We define contraction of the economy in two successive quarters. So if
Oh,
you see the quarter of October to December 2023, Japanese economy contracted by 0.4%. And if you see the July to September 2023 quarter, the contraction was 3.3%. Now, the contraction in October to December 23 quarter was just 0.4%, although the forecast was that economy will grow by 1.4%.
oh,
So that was against the expected growth. Now, having said that, what are the reasons there is this technical recession? There may be multiple reasons. One is that Japanese currency yen has become weaker against the dollar. It has lost its value against the dollar. So
Oh,
in year 2024, yen has already lost 6% of its value against the dollar. And year 2023, it had lost around 8% against the dollar. So the combined loss is around 14% or higher. So yen is much weaker against the dollar. And since the GDP is counted in US dollars, so there
oh,
is a superficial contraction of Japanese economy because of the weakness of the dollar.
okay.
Weakness of the dollar is in some ways advantageous to Japan, because if dollar is weak, foreign direct investors will be able to purchase shares in Japanese economy because it's much cheaper. And that has resulted in foreign institutions and foreign investors buying shares in Japanese economy, and the stock market, Japanese stock market, Nikkei N225 is at a 34 years high.
Oh,
Stock market is booming while the
hmm.
country is in technical recession. Now, there are some domestic issues in Japanese economy, that the private consumption has gone down by 0.2%, and capital expenditure also fell by 0.1%. So minor, decrease in domestic consumption and minor decrease in capital expenditure. But there's another reason why there's technical recession. Japanese economy is fueled by domestic consumption, but also because of China. Japanese economy is very strongly linked with Chinese economy. And if you see from 2014 onwards, pretty much every year, the foreign direct investment of Japan into mainland China is like 10 or 11 or 12 billion dollars a year.
Oh,
Japanese companies manufacture goods in China for sale in Chinese domestic market. And since the Chinese economy is getting headwinds and is slowing down and is contracting, the consumption in China is also going down, which affects Japanese economy. So these are some of the reasons why there is some contraction in Japanese economy. But the recession is only a technical recession. I doubt whether it will be long lasting. I was talking to a Japanese strategic expert this morning, and he said that people are very gung ho on the stock market. Stock market is rising. So
yeah.
the effect of this recession is not likely to be palpable in the Japanese domestic situation. Uh, the other thing is that, Japan has the largest consumer market, and Japan has second highest foreign exchange reserves after China. China,
Oh,
with Hong Kong, has around $4 trillion of foreign exchange reserves, and Japan has foreign exchange reserves of $1.4 trillion, the second highest. Japan has third largest, you know, assets, national assets, to the tune of $12 trillion. Japan is the largest creditor nation in the world. United States, although is the largest economy, but they have $35 trillion of foreign debt. Similarly, China is around 17 or 18 trillion dollar economy. They have very high foreign debt. Japan is a creditor nation. So my guess is, again, I'm not an economist. I'm just a student of strategic studies, but this is just a technical recession.
I
I
see.
understand that the Japanese economy was in a stagnation mode for almost 20 years, from 1990s to, you know, early 2000s, but at least the stock market is very high, and the recession is just technical recession. And if we look at the top five GDP economies, the United States is the first, followed by China. And then number three used to be Japan. And at this point in time, uh, Japan's, you know, economy, GDP is around $4.2 trillion. And Germany, which is number three, their economy is, I think, around $4.7 trillion. So the difference between Japanese economy and German economy is around $500 billion.
Oh, I see.
So there is very neck to neck situation. And if yen appreciates against the dollar, probably Japan will regain the number three thing. But if you look at number three, number four, number five, German economy is $4.7 trillion, Japanese economy is $4.2 trillion, and Indian economy at this point in time is 4.1.
Oh,
So you can imagine how neck to neck we are, and it is expected. The trends are that by end of 2026, Indian economy would be number three, having surpassed both Japanese GDP and German GDP. So
what
that,
will be the size of Indian economy by 2026?
well, you know, you cannot, forecast the size, but the trends, if are followed up,
Yeah.
we will definitely exceed the 5 trillion mark, but we should be number three by end of 2026 in terms of GDP, nominal value, not purchasing power. With purchasing power, we are already number three.
So coming to Japan, that's what I wanted to learn from you. Actually, how serious is this recession for Japan? Actually, because I knew it's a very sound economy. Japan's economy is very sound. How they are facing the recession. So that's what I wanted to learn from you. So this is a technical recession. Do you think India has a role in this? India can do something.
Answer is no.
Oh,
Answer is an absolutely no. The people who can take Japan out of this technical recession are three.
oh,
And those are, uh, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, Japan's Finance Minister Shunichi Suzuki, and Governor of Bank of Japan, Kazuo Ueda. These are the three people who are running Japanese economy, and they have the role by, modifying the policies to make sure that this technical recession goes away. Uh, in specific, I would say that the role of Governor Kazuo Ueda has been criticized domestically in Japan because of giving mixed messages to Japanese corporate sector. The goal has been to keep the inflation less than 2%. And the economy has been kind of governed by loose policies. So, because of that, there is this technical recession or weakening of yen against the dollar. But the people who govern Japanese economy or who direct the Japanese economy, they have role to pull Japan out of the recession. India has no role to play.
I see. So India has no role to play, but do you think India can gain something from this situation in Asia with Japan?
Well, India can always leverage our relationship with Japan and benefit as India's stature is rising. You did in your introduction mention that, despite cultural, civilizational links, there is some sort of disconnect between India and Japan, and that is true.
Yeah.
And there are reasons for that. Uh, yes, we have historical, cultural, civilizational, and spiritual links. The ancient Japanese religion, Shinto, is very close to Sanatana Dharma.
I
And
see.
people even say Shinto is actually derived from the word Sindhu.
I see. Yeah, we discussed
Okay.
that.
So if you go to Japanese temples, traditional Japanese temples and Shinto shrines, not Buddhist temples, they worship Hindu gods or Sanatan gods. Devi Saraswati is worshipped. Uh, she has a Japanese name. Similarly, Lord Ganesha is worshipped in Japan. And in their praise, Sanskrit shloka are recited, but with a Japanese inflection and Japanese, you know, way of pronouncing. So there are, deep from 752 AD onwards, deep cultural, civilizational, spiritual linkages between Japan and Bharat. Having said that, in post-World War II situation of Japan, you need to understand what happened to Japan. Japan became a client state of United States. Japan
Yeah,
constitution was dictated by uh, United States, armed forces commanders from the Pacific Command. They were not allowed to write their own. So all their dynamism, all their aggression was channeled towards developing Japanese businesses. And there was an attempt to Americanize Japan and Christianize Japan
right.
after Second World War. So Japan is in a very artificial state. It is still controlled by United States in a lot of ways. It's a treaty ally, and there are a lot of decisions they cannot take on their own. Yes, they can run their economy. They still have the post Second World War constitution that does not allow Japanese defense forces to be deployed abroad and all that sort of thing. And they have not been able to mend that constitution despite a lot of efforts by former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
Yeah,
So Japan is in a very peculiar situation, and because they were perfect business persons, perfect entrepreneurs, they did not think very highly of Bharat because of the license permit quota Raj, very poor infrastructure, uh,
yeah,
very wide corruption in Bharat. So there were a lot of reasons there is this disconnect. Last but not the least, uh, there is some interest in Bharat now. And in last visit of Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to Bharat in I think 2022, he promised to have an investment of $42 billion in India's northeast. Now, Japan has been, if you see the trend, Japan has been investing in either Buddhist countries, whether they happen to be China or Myanmar, and they happen to be comfortable investing in countries that have Asian ancestry.
Yeah.
And so that is a little bit kind of racist policy that if you look quote unquote Asian or Oriental, then they are likely to invest. So the investment is going to be India's northeast. It is not openly stated why, but I'm just letting you know that they are much more comfortable dealing with people of Oriental ancestry and in Buddhist countries. So there is some disconnect. We understand that. Having said that, things are slowly and steadily changing. There are defense collaboration between both countries. And yes, they invested in our, you know, bullet
Well,
train
yeah.
and Ahmedabad, Mumbai corridor, transport corridor, and all.
Mhm.
It is expected not as a result of this recession, technical recession, but because of global trend towards de-risking and decoupling from Chinese economy. If
Yeah.
like Japan has invested more than $100 billion, more than $100 billion in China over the last 10 years, if that investment is taken out and invested in country like India, or for that matter, from their $1.4 trillion foreign exchange reserves, if we have single window clearance and if we have infrastructure, India's infrastructure need itself is $350 billion. So there's role for Japan to invest in India, and I think it will depend upon both the prime ministers to harness this relationship to the next level so that it becomes a win-win situation.
Yeah. So when Mr. Narendra Modi became the prime minister and he visited Japan, he very uh, he took a very what I say. He tried to convince the Japanese government, you India will do everything to attract investment from Japan, even the single window clearance directly under the supervision of Prime Minister. So all that was promised to Japan, but I don't know what happened because the Japanese didn't show much interest in India actually.
So Japanese economy is totally privately owned, privately directed, and Japan has ancient or established business houses. These are family run concerns. Like Suzuki is controlled by a Suzuki family, or the Toyota cars, automobiles, they are controlled by a Toyota family. So even Sony is a family concern. So these are big family owned conglomerates. So despite government's interest, sometimes it's the individual business houses that determine where the investment will go, and they have to see, they have to feel comfortable. So that is another layer of complexity. Uh, I think there are reasons why Japan should be looking towards India and we should be looking towards Japan. Japan is a shrinking nation. Japan's current population is around 125 million. Their population has been shrinking at a rate of 0.7% per year.
Oh,
The total fertility rate in Japan is around 1.4 per woman. Actually, 1.26 children per woman. And for any country to sustain its population, the total fertility rate per woman has to be 2.1 and higher.
yes.
So it is a shrinking society. The birth rate is 6.6 per thousand, whereas death rate is 11.7 per thousand.
What's the reason behind it actually? Because Japan never had a one-child policy.
They don't have one child policy, but because, as I said, the Japanese dynamism, Japanese aggression got converted into business, work in business. Uh, Most of the Japanese have adopted what is called corporate culture. So they are in their offices from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., leaving very little time for families, leaving very little time for marriage, leaving very little time for rearing children. So that is the situation. Actually, their success in business is showing impact on other things. So Japan has labor shortages, and Japan has signed some agreements with Bharat to provide some labor surplus. So that is a positive thing. Japan is opening its higher education for Indian students. Of course, Indian students will have to learn Japanese language first. So there are some efforts, that would help, and it will be again a win-win situation. Bharat has excess of labor. The productivity of Japanese labor is very low. Japan is not an enterprising nation. The number of unicorns companies is only six. That is 0.64% of the world unicorns. So they are not very heavy into startups, whereas the Indian economy is now sort of, being governed by startups. New and new startups are coming. So there would be some complementarity between Japan and Bharat. If Indian professionals, Indian labor goes to Japan and Indian students go to Japan, it will be a slow process because of the historical reasons. Japan is a ally of United States, a treaty ally. Bharat is not. So we have, despite being democratic nations, we have different priorities, and that has prevented emergence in unison. But there are other areas where there is a role, uh, and I think over a period of time, since the maturing of the quadrilateral security dialogue version 3.0 that we are witnessing now,
Yeah.
Japan or India are feeling comfortable with each other. So there is some Japan India defense relationship that is increasing, but sky is the limit for that to happen. Uh, so there are areas where we can work together, definitely, and it will help both the countries.
So what I see, the way we were robbed by the Britishers, because they ruled nearly 200 years, and they robbed us mentally. Whatever the money they have taken, that's a different thing. Culturally, spiritually, and mentally. So a scar is still there on Indian mind, the British colonialism. So in the similar manner, Japanese have been robbed by the Americans.
Uh, I think they have been conditioned because of their defeat in World War II, and the way the World War II was ended was a significant trauma on Japanese psyche. United States actually used Japan for experimented with nuclear weapons. And American standard argument is that in order to prevent further bloodshed, we had to use American nuclear weapons in Japan. Why not in Germany?
Yeah,
That is a question.
yeah,
Why didn't you use the major threat to you that was from Germany, Nazi Germany? You didn't do because Japanese were not Caucasians. So there was an element there. And that argument can be defeated that, okay, you used a nuclear weapon in Hiroshima. Why did you need to use after 3 days a nuclear weapon in Nagasaki when you had already used one weapon in Hiroshima that brought Japan to its knees? So the trauma on Japanese psyche is very significant, and they have given up their militaristic past, and they just look for US for guidance. Uh, and in that sense, they cannot actually sort of empathize with Bharat the way Bharat is at this point in time. So they will always look for what US will think of any initiative that
Yeah.
always comes, that they are always looking above their shoulders what Uncle Sam is doing. There are US bases in Japan. So in other words, till US is having undue influence on Japanese policy establishment, Japanese government, a very strong defense relationship with Japan and Bharat is not going to materialize.
So, what do you think Japanese people or the Japanese government
Hmm.
can come out with this impression actually from the American influence?
Whatever they can do, I can tell you that if you see threat perceptions, Bharat and Japan have different threat perceptions, and that becomes a very strong point for a point of irritation for Bharat and our government. Japan has never condemned Pakistan. Okay.
Yeah.
For Bharat, there are major two threats. One is China, second is Pakistan. For
Yeah.
Japan, there are also two threats, and they are China and North Korea. So the commonality is in perception of China as a hegemonic power, which is a threat to both Japan and Bharat, and that is driving us together. But Japanese underestimate Pakistani threat to the existence of Bharat. Similarly, Indian defense establishment does not appreciate Japanese perception of North Korean threat. If the two countries can come to some terms with those two issues on strategic sphere, I think they will be well past their, kind of aloofness or indifference towards each other. So both the countries have to understand each other's compulsions. Uh,
Right.
but there is a scope, for burgeoning defense relationship. Uh, Japan at this point in time, since the end of World War II, does not design aircraft carriers.
Yeah.
All they have is helicopter carriers. They have two or three helicopter carriers that are in the range of 28,000 ton displacement. Bharat at this point in time has two aircraft carriers, and we have indigenous capability of designing from scratch and constructing aircraft carriers in the range of 45,000 ton displacement capacity. The third aircraft carrier is being manufactured in Bharat at this point in time. So, if both countries are smart and both countries perceive China as a threat, China has third and fourth aircraft carrier being manufactured at this point in time, and their aircraft carriers are based on a platform they purchased from Ukraine in 1999, Variag, which is called Lionig, and it has a displacement of 65,000 tons, much larger. So if Japan has to protect itself from this threat, which they have, and if they want to develop Japanese aircraft carriers, they can work in collaboration with Bharat. They don't have to work in collaboration with US and
Yeah.
purchase Ford class carriers, which are super carriers, 95,000, 105,000 ton displacement. Cost is like 20 billions or above. Uh, it will be a very good partnership, you know. Bharat would be able to sell or jointly develop an aircraft carrier with Japan. It brings benefits to both without any
Yes,
fear of any country losing. So there are areas we can work together. We can actually also collaborate in the space sector. You know, ISRO is now going into commercial launches and things like that. ISRO has, recently incorporated a business company that will be dealing with the business, international business. So space cooperation is very, very important. And I think Japanese Space Agency and ISRO have developed a collaborative program. So these are the areas of growth there where we can work together.
yes, yes. So I am also feeling that Americans have a role in eliminating the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, because Shinzo Abe was taking a very sincere efforts in developing the domestic military actually.
Yes, that is true. Again, Japanese politics is very complex. The dominant player is LDP or Liberal Democratic Party, which has been, except for a very short period of time when the socialists came to power in Japan, but it represents the traditional business interests with multiple factions, and Japanese politics is faction ridden. By and large, no prime minister lasts more than 2 years. So it is the economic interests that are driving Japanese policies. And except for Shinzo Abe, none of the prime ministers have been visionaries,
Uh,
strategic visionaries. So, uh, Fumio Kishida has been there since more than 2 years, but average lifespan of a Japanese prime minister is only 2 years. So as US is declining, if Japan gets on its own feet, there's a lot of resistance and opposition to US military base in Okinawa. Local population is very upset, but the Japanese government does not want Americans to go, but there are crimes committed by soldiers who are based in the Okinawa base from time to time on Japanese civilian, Japanese women. Uh, and I think that creates a lot of hostility amongst Japanese citizens. But the government actually disregards that. But I'm sure a time will come when Japanese government will say that thank you, we don't want to host a US base. I think that will be contingent upon what is Chinese posture. So Japan is under US nuclear umbrella, defense umbrella, as part of US extended deterrence because China has nuclear weapons, Japan does not have. So they continue to rely on US patronage and US defense umbrella for deterrence, nuclear deterrence. So it's a complex situation, but I'm pretty sure gradually Japanese society will rediscover itself culturally, civilizationally, just
yeah,
like you mentioned that Bharat still has some scars of colonialism, but Bharat is awakening.
yeah,
Bharatiya citizens are rediscovering their cultural, their spiritual, their civilizational roots, and people are no longer taking a colonial perspective at the face value. I am pretty sure on Japanese intelligentsia, there will be a push to go back to Japanese roots and try to undermine the post World War II Americanization of Japanese polity.
I see. But Japan has always shown cold feet to India actually, because as I have my feeling is I have seen that. they are not very enthusiastic about India or investment or for business purpose. But since they are facing some challenges, whatever is the severity of the challenge today, do you think any efforts by government of India will be welcomed by the Japan
I
or
think
collaboration?
we should continue to work with improving our relationship with Japan. We should keep on engaging them bilaterally as well as multilaterally, whether that is in quadrilateral security dialogue, G20, or any other such forums. We also need to develop some minilaterals or trilaterals with Japan in the Asian context, uh, as I spoke the other time, that maybe a trilateral of Japan, South Korea, and Bharat, or a quadrilateral of Japan, Bharat, South Korea, and Taiwan to deal with a common threat. Uh, I think that kind of relationship would be good. Uh, Japanese investment in Bharat are increasing, and as Bharat's own corporate sector reforms itself and the infrastructure is improved, I am pretty sure over a period of time, more and more Japanese investment, direct foreign investment, will come into Bharat. More so with Japan's now uh, understanding that China is not going to be beneficial for them. So I expect slow de-risking followed by decoupling from Chinese economy as US is doing, and Japan will follow suit. Once there is de-risking and decoupling from Chinese economy, the surplus Japanese investment will go to other Asian countries, and Bharat would be one of them. It will not be exclusively directed towards Bharat, but will depend upon how we play our cards with Japan.
Right. So that was all the question I had on this topic, sir. So you have answered it in detail actually, and it has cleared my doubts and whatever I wanted to learn from you. So
Well, Mr. Sinha, it was pleasure to come on your platform and talk about Japan, its situation, and how we can leverage current Japanese situation for a win-win relationship with Japan.
So thank you, viewer. Thank you for tuning in to Bharat and Geopolitics. We hope you enjoyed diving into Japan's recession and India's potential role in turning the tide with us. So remember to subscribe for more insightful discussions. Feel free to reach out with any feedback or suggestions you have. We will be answering your questions. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.
Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good night.
Welcome.